my honor, honor for my honor, my honor, my honor, my honor, your honor, in your honor, your honor,
My honor! Honor!
honor, the honor.
Hello and welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing yet another different thing. We're going to be discussing Avatar: The Last Airbender and which cards I think will be modern playable in it. We're going to be starting with what I think is going to be the most playable, and then we'll work our way down to those that might see less play, maybe fringe, might not see play, and get into some honorable mentions eventually. All in all, the set looks really interesting. This is a little better than most of the Universes Beyond sets that we've been getting. But let's hop into it. So starting things off today with Wan Shi Tong Librarian, blue X, flash flying vigilant. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you put X counters on them, and then draw half X cards rounded down. And whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. I could probably go on for an hour or more about how good this card is in the modern format. So most notably, fetch lands. All 10 fetch lands search the library. So let's say you're on the play, your opponent plays a fetch land, goes back to you, you play your second land. On your end step, they fetch. You flash in Wan Shi Tong. You draw a card and put a counter on Wan Shi Tong. They go to their turn, maybe they play another fetch land, and then they have to use it to search. And you get to put another counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw another card. And throughout the course of the game, this card's just going to draw you so many cards. It's just going to provide an insane level of card advantage. And on top of that, even if you draw it really late into the game, you can just pay more mana into X. Let's say it's hit the really late game and you pay 4 mana into X. So you get a 6 mana, 5/5 flash flying vigilance that draws you 2 cards. That's not bad at all. And don't forget, whenever we're drawing cards in Modern, we've got Quantum Riddler now. Wan Shi Tong's going to work great with Quantum Riddler. That's a card that I couldn't even fit onto this entire slide here. So you're low on resources, you've got Wan Shi Tong out, opponent search their library while you have Quantum Riddler out as well. Boom, draw 2 cards. Maybe you do Flash in a Solitude, pitch something, they search again, and then you get to draw 2 more cards. Wan Shi Tong's just going to be one of those premier card advantage engines in the format. And it's not even necessarily an engine. It's just one card that's going to draw a ton of cards over the course of the game. And there is no shortage of things that search in Modern. I mean, obviously we have all the fetch lands. There's Ghost Quarter, which is seeing a good bit of play right now. You could, as the Ghost Quarter player, target your opponent, make them search. Speaking of making your opponent search, I've seen a lot of people talking about scheming symmetry. It's 1 black mana, choose 2 target players. So you choose yourself and the opponent. Each of them searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top. After the search, Wan Shi Tong triggers and you draw that card that you just searched for. Notably, it does not work with things like Surgical Extraction, where you are the one searching your opponent's library. It's only when the opponent searches their own library. But again, myriad of things we can do. Cleansing Wildfire. We can Cleansing Wildfire the opponent's land, or White Orchid Phantom the opponent's land. And they go to search for a basic, Wan Shi Tong draws cards. We could exile their creature with Path to Exile, draw a card. So it turns Path to Exile into 1 mana, remove a creature, draw a card. Maybe you're playing against Stoneforge Mystic, Tezzeret. Either one of those searches the library. Maybe you're playing against Amulet Titan. They've got Summoner's Pact, Green Sun Zenith, Urza's Saga, Prime Time. All of these search the library, so you get to draw a card off each of them. And while that might not be as relevant against something like Primetime, let's say they're searching their library, you're drawing a bunch of cards, boom, you find a Flare of Denial. Now you can sack your Wan Shi Tong and counter maybe their big Primetime after they Urza Zaga'd for a Amulet earlier on in the turn. Even against decks that don't play a lot of fetch lands, they still search their decks with things like Expedition Map for Tron. We've got things like Neoform that do a lot of searching. So you've got Neoform, Eladamri's Call, you've got Eldritch Evolution. So against them, draw a bunch of cards, maybe find your Flare of Denial or some other answer to their deck. Court of Calling, Whir of Invention, just so many cards that search the library in Modern, where Wan Shi Tong's going to be able to capitalize, draw a bunch of cards, It's going to be great in the early game. It's going to be great in the late game. There's already a couple decks I can envision slotting this in. One of those being the Simic Ritual deck. 2 mana, draw a card as premier for what we're looking for in the deck. It'll probably replace something like Fibblethip in the deck because it just provides more of a late game. It does get a little awkward with Harbinger of the Seas being double blue, but you can still just play it for double blue and then on your turn 3, then grab your green land and it'd probably be fine, or your forest specifically, not just any green land, your forest. I see it slotting into some type of blue-black mid-range control deck. You're playing things like Psychic Frog, Abhorrent Oculus, Murktide Regent, Wan Shi Tong, and maybe Orcish Bowmaster. So you play your 20 creature suite, your 20 spells, your 20 lands. Those are one of my favorite archetypes of decks to play, where you're just playing a nice mid-range game with creatures, spells that control, and then lands. Really no shortage of what Wan Shi Tong's capable of in Modern. Again, could go on for hours, but we've got a lot of other cards to hit, so let's get into the next one. Next up, we have Badgermole Cub. 1 and a green, when this creature enters, Earthbend 1. And what Earthbend does is, you target a land you control, it becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that's still a land. You put a counter on it. You put a number of counters on it equal to whatever the Earthbend is. Here it's just 1. And then whenever it dies or is exiled, you return it to the battlefield tapped. And then it also has, whenever you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. So there's 2 different routes you can take with this. So there's the part where you Earthbend, and there's the part where you tap a creature for mana. So imagine a world where you play a turn 1 Dork, doesn't matter what, it could be Birds of Paradise, could be Elvish Mystic, could be Ignoble Hierarch, doesn't matter what it is. Turn 1, you play a Dork. Turn 2, you tap the Dork in your land to play Badgermole Cub, and then you target your own Ghost Quarter. Earthbend it. You destroy one of your opponent's lands. Ghost Quarter, quote, dies, and then is returned to the battlefield. So you get to use your Ghost Quarter twice. And so I find this working really well in some type of Ice-Till Explorer deck where you're just trying to repeatedly recur things like Ghost Quarter to destroy your opponent's lands. In a similar vein, maybe you're not even just doing that. Maybe you just get a fetch land. So turn 1, play your land, play your bird. Turn 2, play your fetch land, play Badgermole Cub, target your fetch land, crack your fetch land, get a card, you get your fetch land back, and then it's ramping you. And on top of that, it's ramping you even further because now in the future, your Birds of Paradise taps for additional mana. And this effect I don't think is going to be as relevant in Modern, though when you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. We already have a very similar effect with Keenan Bonder Prodigy, which does a very similar thing. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced, and then you can pay 7, look at the top 5, and cast a non-human creature card from among them for free. But Badgermole, just being able to recur things like Ghost Quarters and fetch lands, working well with something like Ice-Till Explorer, where you can go turn 1, Dork, turn 2, Badgermole Cub, turn 3, Ice-Till Explorer, and just really start destroying all of your opponent's lands really quickly. I think we'll see some kind of strategy like that emerge in the format with something like Badgermole Cub, but we'll see. Next up, we have a card that I think is mostly going to be attributed to the sideboard. We got Redirect Lightning. It's a red instant lesson. As an additional cost to cast it, you can either pay 5 life or pay 2 mana, and you change the target of a spell or ability with a single target. So, where this is most notable is with Goblin Charbelcher. So remember, they reveal cards from the top of their library. Typically, they reveal their entire library, and they're like, hey, I'm going to dome you for 40 damage. Redirect Lightning says, no, you're going to dome yourself for 40 damage. We already see a little bit of play with these redirection effects in Untimely Malfunction, where you change the target of a spell or ability with a single target. It's mostly used to play against Goblin Charbelcher, but the difference between 1 and 2 mana is astronomical. This lets you leave up 2 of these if you really want to. And it's good for just redirecting other effects as well, so maybe your opponent tries to Ghost Quarter one of your lands. You say, no, you're going to Ghost Quarter your own land. They try to Fatal Push one of your creatures. No, Fatal Push your own creature. They try to Solitude one of your creatures. Say, no, you're going to Solitude your own Solitude or Solitude another creature you have. Being able to redirect spells is going to be fairly important in Modern. It will probably most likely be relegated to the sideboard, but who knows, maybe it'll even see some main board play in certain red decks. We'll see what's to come. Next up, we have Spirit Water Revival. 1 blue, as an additional cost to cast the spell, you may waterbend 6, which is you can either pay 1 mana, tap an artifact, or tap a creature to help pay for that effect. So typically you'll pay 3 mana and then like tap 6 other things, or maybe 4 mana, tap 5 other things, so on. So just for 3 mana, it just draws 2 cards. It's a divination. But if the spell's additional cost was paid, so if you waterbended 6, instead shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw 7 cards, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So we have these kinds of effects in Modern already with things like Days Undoing and Echoes of Eternity, but with those, each player does it. So both players get it. It's symmetrical, but with Spirit Water Revival, this is a one-sided draw 7. Granted, it's 9 mana, but it's also not really 9 mana, because there's a lot of ways to make a lot of creatures or make a lot of artifacts in Modern. So we could play this in Affinity. This deck loves Affinity. Getting out 6 artifacts is not that difficult in Affinity, and one thing Affinity really struggles with is running out of gas. If we go for a turn where we play Pinnacle Emissary, play a few artifacts, maybe we get a Mox Opal or a Springleaf Drum out, and then during the next turn we can Spirit Water Revival, paying 3 mana, and then tapping down like 6 of our artifacts, and then drawing a new fresh 7 to help us find something like Kappa Cannoneer. I think this is going to be one of those things that just pushes something like Affinity even further. There's other decks that can also make a ton of creatures. We've got Ocelot Pride and Springheart Non-Tuco that can make a lot of tokens. Ocelot Pride, just getting more and more. If you have multiple copies of Ocelot Pride and you're in a blue deck that's playing Mockingbird with it, you can just make a bunch of creatures very early on in the game, use up your hand, gas out, play Spirit Water Revival, and draw a fresh brand new 7. And again, we do have these effects already. We see Days Undoing in Modern in Azorius Control alongside Narset Parter of Veils. Days Undoing is only 3 mana, but again, it's symmetrical. It also ends your turn, where with Spirit Water Revival, you can go ahead and keep playing cards after that. But in Azorius Control, it's kind of used as a combo piece with Narset because it stops your opponent from being able to draw cards, so they discard their hand, or I guess they technically shuffle it into their library, and then they just draw a single card with Narset. And then we have Echoes of Eons, but again, it's symmetrical. It's 6 mana, or you can flash it back for 3, but it being symmetrical is what's really important. Letting your opponent draw a fresh 7 is really bad, especially considering most of the time you're using up all of your mana to play these kinds of effects, and your opponent gets to utilize these cards before you do. Now, with Spirit Water Revival, you're the one that gets to utilize them. Plus, in addition, they're not drawing anything. You're getting all of the value out of Spirit Water Revival, and I think that's going to be the most important thing about it. It does take some setup. It only goes in certain styles of decks, but I think the decks that it will work in are going to perform really well. Next up, we have Price of Freedom. 1 in a red, sorcery lesson. Destroy target artifact or land an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle, draw a card. This is just another Cleansing Wildfire effect. It's a little different. This one could destroy an artifact, but Cleansing Wildfire can also hit your own lands as well. I have seen a couple of Boros decks going around that are focused on destroying a bunch of lands with things like Cleansing Wildfire, Geomancer's Gambit, and then Ephemerating White Orchid Phantom. And you just destroy all of your opponent's lands, make it to where they can't play the game, and then just try to get there in the long game by just beating down with a couple of creatures, maybe some White Orchid Phantom, some Solitudes, things like that. Notably, the Price of Freedom doesn't hit your own land, and you're like, why would you want to hit your own land? Because it can act as ramp with things like Rustvale Bridge or Flagstones of Trocare, so you target the Rustvale Bridge. Because it's indestructible, it doesn't get destroyed, but you still get to search for that basic land and draw that card. Similarly with Flagstones of Trocare, you destroy your Flagstones of Trocare, you search up a basic, and then you search up any planes in your deck with Flagstones of Trocare. Doesn't necessarily have to be a basic planes, could be a Sacred Foundry, could be an Elegant Parlor. But being able to get this type of effect down from Geomancer's Gambit, because in Modern right now, we just have Cleansing Wildfire and Geomancer's Gambit that has these kind of effects. 3 mana is a lot in Modern, but getting this down to 2 by playing Price of Freedom is going to give us maybe a style of deck that's focused on destroying the opponent's lands, getting all the basics out. and then just going ahead and destroying what they have. Most modern decks are playing maybe 1 to 3 basics, so after you get those out of the way, everything is just free land destruction from there. Alright, next up we've got Foggy Swamp Visions. For 1 black, it's a sorcery. Has an additional cost to cast a spell. You can waterbend X, so again, you just tap things or pay mana into it. Exile X target creature cards from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, you create a token that's a copy of it. And then at the beginning of your next end step, you sacrifice those tokens. So I think this could see play in a Goryo-style deck. I think it's pretty unlikely, but we'll get into why in a moment. But let's say you have a game plan where turn 2, you play Psychic Frog. Turn 3, you discard an Atraxa or a Gristlebrand. Then you cast Foggy Swamp Visions, copy one of those, or I guess exile and then make a copy of it by tapping the Psychic Frog to pay for the Waterbend X. So you can do this as early as turn 3. You get Gristlebrand, you draw 7 or 14 cards, refill your hand, Atraxa, do something very similar, and then at the end step, you just sacrifice them. What you can do is in different parts of the game, let's say it's late game, it's turn 5, 6, something like that, you cast this Foggy Swamp Visions, you can get an Atraxa and a Gristlebrand from graveyard, and then you get both of the effects. And notably, you can consign to memory this trigger at the beginning of your next end step to sacrifice those tokens, so you can consign to memory the trigger to keep around the copy of Gristlebrand or keep around the copy of Atraxa. But because it's a token, you cannot ephemerate it, so it's just a consign to memory plan. This deck normally runs 4 consign to memory and some number of ephemerates anyway, so that's not too big of a problem. I don't think this game plan's nearly as strong as Goryo's Vengeance. Goryo's Vengeance is only 2 mana, it's instant speed, it gives the creature haste. The splice onto an arcane comes up on rare occasion, but it happens. You don't have to waterbend X. Goryo's Vengeance is going to be a lot more premier for the deck. I don't think Foggy Swamp Visions is going to be replacing Goryo's Vengeance, but maybe it's ran as a 1 or 2 of, in addition to Goryo's Vengeance to get even more reanimation, maybe in one of these more all-in strategies of Goryo's Vengeance. Next up, we have May Scornful Striker. For 1 and a black, it's a legendary creature with first strike, and whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life. The main place I see this being relevant in is against Ruby Storm. So Ruby Storm, their whole game plan is to cast a ton of non-creature spells during their turn, normally up to whatever your life total is, 10, 20, whatever it is, and then they grape shot you. Normally one of the main counterplays to this in Modern right now is something like Magebane Lizard. So whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-creature spells they've cast this turn, and it's a 1/4. Now, 1/4 is a little better than a 2/2. Dealing damage equal to the number of spells they've cast, it's going to hit them quicker than something like May. But May is just going to be one of those options for the black decks that aren't playing red, so maybe you're playing some form of mono black. You want some more Storm Hate that's not just Thoughtseizes or Inquisition, so that way, if they top deck the answer, you can go ahead and have something on board that's ready for them. And on top of that, May can apply pressure, unlike something like Thoughtseize or Inquisition. You can just play it as your creature for turn, be hitting them with it, and then now Storm has to find an answer to May before they can start to storm off. Next up, we have Elemental Teachings. For 4 and a green, it's an instant lesson. You search your library for up to 4 land cards with different names and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards. You put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is pretty similar to Realms Uncharted, where you search for 4 lands, an opponent chooses 2 of those go into the graveyard, and the other 2 go into your hand. With Elemental Teachings, these lands go directly onto the battlefield tapped instead, so it works great with something like Amulet of Vigor. Maybe this could see play in Amulet Titan. The 4 lands that first come to my mind are Echoing Deeps, Lotus Field, Gruul Turf, and Simic Growth Chamber. Echoing Deeps makes it where whatever they put in the graveyard, you would be getting anyway, so I think they almost always have to choose Echoing Deeps to go into the graveyard. And then probably also Lotus Field, so this just turns into 5 mana, put a Gruul Turf and Simic Growth Chamber onto the battlefield. You have multiple Amulet of Vigors out. This makes you have more mana, so you're going net positive. This also works interestingly with Head Shredder, which has whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped instead. So, with Head Shredder out, you just search your library for 4 land cards and basically just put them onto the battlefield, which is pretty good effects. 5 mana, search for 4 lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped. Amulet of Vigor untaps them. What I will say though is I don't think it quite makes the cut because the deck is already playing 2 Scape Shift. I think if it wanted more of these types of effects, they would just play more Scape Shifts. But maybe I can be proven wrong. It might see play in Titan. Let me know down in the comments below if you're a Titan player. Will Elemental Teaching see play? Probably not, but we'll see. Next up, we've got Planetarium of Wan Shi Tong. It's 6 mana. You can pay 1 and tap it to scry 2. Not that great, but this is where it gets good. Whenever you scry or surveil, look at the top card of your library. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Do this only once each turn. So the place where I think about this is in some kind of E-Tron variant or some kind of calibrated deck list where you put Emrakul the Aeon's Torn on top of your library, and then you activate the Planetarium and get to cast a free Emrakul. So this reduces the cost of Emrakul down from like 15 to 7, which 7 is that kind of sweet spot in Modern where we can cast it pretty easily with the Urzatron lands. We can also go ahead and scry this to the top using something like Kozilek's Command, which scries and draws. If we're playing a calibrated deck list, where we also now get Parker Luck, this is just another tool that the deck gets to be able to win, because the deck's already playing 4 Calibrated Blast or Parker Luck, but maybe it finds room for a couple of Planetarium. Maybe it takes a more Eldrazi approach where we're putting in some big creatures and trying to control the opponent with Kozilek's Command, scry things to the top, get the Emrakul with the Planetarium, and just provides like another win condition for the deck. After that, we've got Airbender Ascension. 1 and a white enchantment. When this creature enters, airbend up to 1 target creature. Airbend just means you exile the creature and then it can be cast for 2 mana. So it kind of works like Plot, except you can just cast it immediately. And you can airbend your own creature or your opponent's creature. And whenever a creature you control enters, you put a quest counter on the enchantment. And at the beginning of your end step, if the enchantment has 4 more quest counters on it, you can exile up to 1 target creature you control, return to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this is a 2 mana Soul Harder effect. Soul Harder's got that exact same effect. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile another target creature you control, return to the battlefield under its owner's control. We did see a Soul Harder deck pop up either after MH1 or 2, where you would blink your creatures over and over again to incur a lot of value. So you'd blink things like Skyclave Apparition to remove your opponent's permanents. You could play Aether Channeler to either draw, create 1/1s, return non-land permanents. We've got things like Solitude now, so we can repeatedly on our end step just exile the opponent's stuff. We've got Quantum Riddler. We can warp Quantum Riddler in and then exile it, return it during the end step with the warp trigger on the very bottom of the stack, and Quantum Riddler will come back as a new object and not see that old warp trigger. So this just acts as kind of another ephemerate effect, but you get it every single turn. We haven't seen Soul Herder in quite some time in some Modern, but maybe if we have more copies of it with something like Airbender Ascension, maybe it can see a little more play. I will say getting 4 counters on this is simultaneously easy and difficult. You can't get it that quick, but it is pretty easy to get with things like Ephemerate, Charming Prince. There's a lot of situations where creatures enter the battlefield under your control, and it's not even non-token, so something like Aether Channeler would count as 2. Maybe you're playing something like Ocelot Pride in addition to this, that's making additional tokens on instep and putting quest counters on the Airbender Ascension even more quickly. So I can see a world where there's an Airbender Ascension deck. Unlikely, but I'd be interested to see it happen. Next up, we have Avatar Aang. So near Wooburg, minus the black, so red, green, white, blue. Legendary creature, human avatar ally, 4/4. Flying and Firebending 2. Firebending 2 is whenever you attack, you make 2 red mana, and then you keep it for basically all of combat. It could go away before main phase 2. And whenever you waterbend, earthbend, firebend, or airbend, you draw a card. So Avatar Aang attacks every turn, you firebend, and then you draw a card. And then if you've done all 4 this turn, you transform it. I think it's going to be really difficult to make a deck that does all 4 of these things in Modern. I think there's just too much interaction in Modern to allow all of these. But really, because Avatar Aang already has Firebending, you just need to find a way to Waterbend, Earthbend, and Airbend. We've already seen some cards on these lists that could be seeing Modern play that could allow that. Really what I think Avatar Aang is going to do is it's going to join these 4-color Omnath piles as just more, almost copies of Omnath. It trades off, it's got some ups, it's got some downs compared to Omnath, but a lot of the time Omnath is being used as discard fodder for things like Subtlety and Solitude and Endurance, Force of Vigor, Force of Negation. Because it has all of those colors, it just makes it a premier card to pitch with. But if you can flip Aang, Master of Elements, it has some cards that combo with it. So the flip side is a flying 6/6. Spells you cast cost Wooburg less to cast, and at the beginning of each upkeep, you may transform Aang, Master of Elements. If you do, you gain 4 life, draw 4 cards, put 4 counters on him, and he deals 4 damage to each opponent. So you flip it, and then during your upkeep, you can flip it back to get a bunch of effects. If you're drawing 4 cards and making Aang a flying 8/8 and dealing 4 damage to the opponent, this is just probably going to be a big swing. If you can flip Avatar Aang both times, you're probably winning the game. But if you keep him on his flip side, he does have a combo with Searing Touch. For 1 red, it's an instant that deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and it has buyback 4. So you may pay an additional 4 to cast this spell. If you do, put this card into your hand as it resolves. So Searing Touch is okay. You know, it's much worse than Lightning Bolt in most situations. It'll still pick up things like Ocelot Prides and Ragavans and whatnot. But with Avatar Aang, because the cost is reduced by Wooburg, you pay the red, you pay the buyback. So costs 5 mana, then it costs nothing, and then you just get to repeatedly cast this Searing Touch and deal infinite damage anywhere that you choose. Next up, we've got some honorable mentions. Starting with Benevolent River Spirit. So it's a blue creature, 4/5. So 4/5, rather large for a 2-mana creature. As an additional cost to cast this spell, Waterbend 5. So remember, that's just paying the mana, tapping artifacts or creatures. It is flying and ward 2, and whenever it enters, you scry 2. So I've seen some people comparing this to Abhorrent Oculus. This is obviously worse than Abhorrent Oculus, but could see play in certain styles of decks. You can cheat it out with Aether Vial, so turn 3, you get a 4/5, flying, ward 2, and it goes ahead and scries 2 for you. You could dump this into your graveyard turn 1 and reanimate it turn 2 with something like Unearth. Maybe there's some type of blue-black deck, Unearth style deck that wants to use Benevolent River Spirit. Not sure what that is, but it is here in Modern. Next up, we've got Accumulate Wisdom, 1 in a blue instant where you look at the top 3 cards of your library, you put 1 of those cards into your hand, rest on the bottom of your library in any order, and you put each of those cards in your hand instead if there are 4 or more lesson cards in your graveyard. So, while I don't think it's going to be too good now, we do have 69 lesson cards in Modern right now. Or we will once we have Avatar The Last Airbender fully legal in Modern. And, you know, we've got some pretty decent ones. Most of these are just like slightly worse than some cards that do see play. So you've got Boomerang Basics to bounce spells, Firebending Lesson to kill certain creatures, Quenchia, which is kind of like a weaker mana leak. We've also got lessons from Strixhaven, which came out a few years ago. You get the Price of Freedom that we talked about earlier, the Redirect Lightning. And next year, in April of 2026, we're revisiting Strixhaven in Secrets of Strixhaven, so we could get even more lessons then. So while I don't think Accumulate Wisdom will quite see play yet, maybe we'll get some more and better lessons out of Secrets of Strixhaven, and maybe we'll see some kind of lesson control deck where we're utilizing some of these maybe slightly weaker lessons, dealing damage, you know, just controlling the game. And then we use Accumulate Wisdom as our card advantage spell. So we just 2 mana, draw 3. And it's technically not even a draw 3, so we don't get hurt by things like Orcish Bowmasters. You just put the top 3 cards of your library into your hand. Earlier on in the game, you can just use it as some card selection. And remember, because all of these things have lesson, anything that we have that learns, we can just pull these cards out from our sideboard instead to use. So maybe there's some kind of deck that utilizes learning as a mechanic. So I know there's the 2-mana card from Strixhaven that just ETB learns, and then you can just pull out whichever spell from your sideboard is most relevant in the situation, and maybe you're just repeatedly blinking that, getting a lot of value out of it, and then maybe you go for the Accumulate Wisdom to build back up your hand. Getting into the very honorable mentions, we've got Avatar's Wrath, 2 white sorcery, choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all others. So again, you'll exile all of them, and then they cost 2 to cast. Rather, you can cast them from exile for 2, and then until your next turn, your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. Exile Avatar's Wrath. All of the airbend cards, where you airbend your opponent's cards, work rather well with Drannith Magistrate, so your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So let's say you have Drannith Magistrate out, you have Avatar's Wrath, you exile everything besides Drannith Magistrate. If you exiled some of your own stuff, you can cast it, but your opponent wouldn't be able to cast their stuff. Now, I think this is pretty unlikely to see play. We don't see that many 4-mana board wipes. Right now, the only one we really see is Supreme Verdict. Something like Wrath of the Skies tends to be a little more relevant in Modern. Being able to destroy these really fast wide boards quicker is going to be more relevant. But again, there might be a world where Avatar's Wrath can see play. I've seen some people talk about Secrets of Bloodbending, blue. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may waterbend 10. You control target opponent during their next combat phase, and instead, if the spell's additional cost was paid, you control that player during their next turn instead. And then you just exile it, so it's 4 mana, control your opponent's next combat. Where I've seen people talking about this card is, weirdly enough, not even to take control of opponent's combats and maybe destroy a bunch of their stuff. I've been seeing people talk about it with Sanity Grinding, which we played on the channel somewhat recently. So Chroma, reveal the top 10 cards of your library for each blue mana symbol and the mana cost of the revealed cards. Target opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard, then put the cards you revealed this way on the bottom of your library in any order. So this is just helping you get that blue count up really high. That way Sanity Grinding can mill a ton of cards. You'll play Sanity Grinding along with a bunch of other blue spells, and now we've got a blue spell. You can play it with lands like Seagate Restoration. That way you just have as much chroma as possible. And I can't help but comparing Secrets of Bloodbending to Emrakul the Promised End, where you're just taking your opponent's next turn. Taking their combat can also be pretty relevant. If you're playing against something like Energy and they have Goblin Bombardment out, they're forced to sack their entire board before you get control of their combat, because during their combat you can just sacrifice their entire board and have them shoot themselves. But yeah. Unlikely Secrets of Bloodbending will see play, but maybe there's some type of Sanity Grinding deck that'll pop up. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to some of the new shrines. Shrines, completely unplayable in Modern. Maybe you can build a cute commander deck with it, but we got a couple cool new ones. Northern Air Temple, 1 black, enters, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life where X is the number of shrines you control, and whenever a new shrine enters, you drain your opponent for 1. And Spirit Oasis, or 2 and a blue. Whenever it enters, you draw a card for each shrine you control, and then whenever another shrine you control enters, you draw a card. Shrines have been a card type for a while. I think it got a big buff in M21, where we got some better types of effects that weren't as expensive, because shrines traditionally were costing like 4, 5, 6 mana. With these, they got a bit cheaper, and now we have ones that can drain multiple times, so Northern Air Temple and Sanctum of Stone Fangs could work. They're legendary, so you can't play multiple of the same ones out on the battlefield at the same time. Sanctum of Tranquil Light can tap down creatures. If you have enough shrines out, you can just pay 1 mana, tap a creature, tap down your opponent's board each turn. We've got Sanctum of Calm Waters, which is doing something like Spirit Oasis, where it's drawing cards. I feel like every time we see shrines, we just get cheaper and cheaper versions of some of the old shrines, because Wizards is just like, okay, maybe trying to get out a bunch of shrines isn't that easy to do. Next, quick shout out from Day of Black Sun, Black X. Each creature with mana value X or less loses all abilities until end of turn, and then you destroy those creatures. So this is kind of acting as something like Toxic Deluge or the Meat Hook Massacre, where this is going to be a black board wipe that you can play on turn 3 to kill things like Energy, so get rid of your opponent's Ocelot Prides, Guide of Souls, all of their tokens, and you can even use it later on to get things at 2 or 3 mana as well. And normally making creatures lose abilities isn't that relevant, but it becomes relevant with things like Blood Artist and Marionette Apprentice. So if your opponent's playing some type of aristocrat strategy, such as Soul Trader combo, you make their creatures lose the abilities and then destroy them. So Blood Artist wouldn't hit you for like 1,000,000 damage, nor would Marionette Apprentice. So this just gives black decks another way to kind of hit some of these go wide decks. Next, we've got Sandbender Scavengers, white and the black, 1/1. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you put a counter on this creature. Really easy to sacrifice a bunch of permanents in Modern. This counts things like fetch lands, Mishra's Baubles. This card could just get pretty large pretty quick. And when this creature dies, you may exile it. When you do, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to this creature's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. I don't know why. When I saw this card, I was thinking about like Samwise Cauldron Familiar combo. And you can just use the Sandbender to get back one of your combo pieces from the graveyard by sacrificing it to Viscera Seer. So maybe you have some kind of game plan where like turn 4, turn 5, you tried to go for your combo, your opponent destroyed your Samwise or something. You play Sandbender, crack a fetch land, gets a counter, Viscera Seer, sacrifices the Sandbender, you get back your Samwise, and then you just get to try to go for your combo again. There's a world where this might see play as a 1 or 2 of. There is a chance that it could see some play in like another type of reanimation style deck where you play this turn 2, turn 3, you crack a fetch land, maybe get back a different type of 2-drop, or maybe you're sacrificing some other permanents as well, like treasures, and then you can get this to be really big, really quick, and maybe you just put like 7 counters on it and get back a Gristlebrand. Just something to keep an eye out for. And then here we've got some extra honorable mentions. So realistically, I don't think any of these cards are going to see play, but there's the tiniest chance that they will. So we've got Obsessive Pursuit, 1 and a black. Whenever it enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life and create a clue token. And then whenever you attack, you put X counters on target attacking creature, where X is the number of permanents you've sacrificed that turn. And then if X is 3 or greater, that creature gains lifelink until end of turn. Mostly this is 2 mana, make a clue token every turn. Some decks might want that. I don't know what that deck is, but it's here. We've got Airbender Ascension, 1 and a red. Whenever this enchantment enters, create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Airbending 1. Whenever a creature you control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, put a quest counter on this enchantment. Then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, you may copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Maybe there's some world where you're wanting to use this in combination with Fear of Missing Out or Kalia to get additional attack triggers. Seems like a lot of setup to try to get it going. Anything that requires quest counters is normally taking a lot of setup. We've got Bossing Say. This land enters tapped unless you control a basic land. Taps for green, and then for 2 of green and tapping it, you can Earthbend 2, but only as a sorcery. Again, you can kind of use this with Ghost Quarters or fetch lands. Let's use Ghost Quarters as an example. So you tap 3, tap this, so you're paying 4 mana, Earthbending your Ghost Quarter, blowing up your opponent's land, and then getting your Ghost Quarter back, and then doing it again during your next turn. I think Bossing Say will be a little too slow, but maybe there's a world where you can make it work. Similarly with Haru Hidden Talent, for 1 and a green. Whenever another ally you control enters, you Earthbend 1. So this is just a repeatable way in some kind of ally deck, I suppose, to recur either fetch lands or Ghost Quarters to either blow up a bunch of your opponent's lands or use this as some form of ramp with your fetch lands. We've got the last Agni Kai, 1 and a red instant. Target creature you control fights, target creature an opponent controls, and then if the creature the opponent controls is dealt excess damage, you add that much red, and then you don't lose that mana as steps and phases ended out. So where I could see the last Agni Kai being relevant is you're playing some deck, really large creatures, you hit one of your opponent's small tokens or something, and then you use this for 2 mana to maybe make 5 or 6 mana. And destroy their creature. Could be relevant, don't really see it. And then we have Firebending Student for 1 and a red. It's a prowess creature with Firebending X, where X is this creature's power. maybe you play this in some kind of, is it prowess deck? And then you spend mana, cast some spells, get it large, you attack. It adds you like 3 or 4 mana, which you can then use to cast lightning bolts and holy heats, lava darts, get it larger, pump your board more. I think if this creature had haste or evasion or both, maybe we could see it seeing play, but I think the list is just too tight to fit something like Firebending Student, and then Firebending Student realistically is just kind of too slow for those kind of aggro strategies. Alright, then that's going to be it for today's video. Be sure to let me know if there's any cards that I missed down below. Let me know which cards you're excited for, which ones you think will impact Modern a lot, or maybe even other formats. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, comment what deck you want to see me play next, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace out.